solemnly affirm that the evidence you shall give relative to the cause now under consideration shall be the whole truth and nothing but the truth under the pain and penalty.
I do.
Thank you.
Good morning. Can you please state your name and spell your last name, please?
My name is Harry Jeppe, Jeppe.
And Mr. Jeppe, how are you employed?
I am the Physical Comparison Unit Supervisor at the Vermont Forensic Laboratory. As such, I am a qualified firearm and tool mark examiner.
Where is the Vermont Forensic Laboratory located?
The Vermont Forensic Laboratory is located at 45 State Street in Waterbury, Vermont.
When did you start employment with the Vermont Forensic Laboratory?
On the 1st of April, 2004.
And have you been in the same role since you started 20 years ago?
No, I originally started as a firearm and tool mark examiner, and in 2011, I was promoted to the supervisory position.
Can you spell your first name?
Certainly so. Harry, Harry.
Thank you.
Thank you. Generally speaking, what do firearms examiners do?
We examine every item of evidence related to firearms. With other words, firearms, obviously, fired cartridge components, which include cartridge cases, fired bullets, unfired cartridges, firearms magazines. We also do tool marks, where we compare submitted tools to, for example, locks or padlocks or anything that was used, any implement that was used to break into a home, a screwdriver, for example, used to pry open a window, and so on. Those are all considered to be tool marks. We also do chemical distance determinations based on propellant residue, firearms propellant residue. We do serial number restorations, and yeah, that's pretty much covers it.
What's your educational background?
I have a diploma in forensic or in policing from the Technikon of South Africa. I also have a Bachelor of Technology degree from the University of South Africa in policing. I have an advanced certificate in forensic criminalistics, which is a 2-year study program, which I did through the University of South Africa, and it basically I majored in forensic ballistics. I also did a 3-year training program through the South African Police Service Forensic Ballistics Unit in Cape Town in South Africa.
This might be a hard question to answer, but how many comparisons would you estimate that you have made to determine whether a particular bullet or cartridge case was fired from a particular weapon?
Literally thousands. If we're not talking about cases, I've been doing this since 1998, and I have not only looked at my own cases, but I've also done technical reviews. We have a mandated system of technical review in our laboratory where every comparison that is performed by an analyst is then sort of technical reviewed or verified by a second analyst. So in that sense, I have literally looked at thousands.
Have you testified in Vermont courts in the past?
Yes, I have.
How many times?
More than 40 times.
Have you been previously qualified as an expert, as a subject matter expert?
Yes, I have.
And what's the expertise?
Firearm and tool mark examination.
Your Honor, the state would move to qualify Mr. Jeppe as an expert in firearms and tool mark examinations.
I have no objection, Judge.
It's necessary, but.
It's not
in the law,
necessary, but I have no
so
objection.
Thank you. I'm going to ask you some questions about general testing procedures. Can you explain to the jury what forensic firearms identification is?
Sure. So a firearms examination, specifically as it relates to the case in question, involves a firearm that is examined to determine if it's in working condition. The firearm is then testified. Those test standards which we generate in the laboratory, with other words, the cartridges that we fire in that firearm in the laboratory, we use those, or we consider those to be our known standards. With other words, those are, we can relate to the firearm because we know the base truth that those came from the firearm. Those we use for comparison purposes, and obviously anything else that's submitted, like in this case, for example, where we had cartridge cases and bullets submitted, we would take those cartridge cases and those bullets, and we would physically compare them to the known standards to determine if they were fired from the same firearm.
And what makes such an identification possible?
When you're ignition components, those components will show striated markings or scratch marks, basically, which are the result of the components being in direct contact with any surface inside the firearm during the firing process. So any feature that is latent, whether it's present on the firearm but not necessarily visible by, through the naked eye, is transferred onto the fired components during the firing process. Obviously, when you discharge a firearm, there's a lot of energy that's generated, there's a lot of pressure. The pressure causes expansion of the cartridge case. That's basically what eventually projects the bullet through the barrel. That interaction between the cartridge case and the bullet, in other words, the container for the propellant and the projectile, that is basically the interaction between those components with the firearm, which at that time the firearm transfers those markings, or the markings are transferred through that interaction onto the bullets and the cartridge cases. By then looking at those scratch marks and the uniqueness of those scratch marks, we can determine, first of all, whether class characteristics are consistent, and secondly, whether individual characteristics are consistent between the fired components and the firearm.
Is this type of identification generally accepted as reliable in the field?
Yes, it is.
When a firearm is used, does it leave markings on a cartridge case?
Yes, it does.
What about the copper jacketing of a bullet?
The copper jacket on a bullet will be marked by the interior surface of the barrel of the firearm, yes.
And what about the lead core that's encapsulated in the copper jacket?
A lead core is generally not in contact with the firearm because it's encapsulated in the jacket, and therefore it is generally not of value for comparison purposes.
So you mentioned this already, but can you explain to the jury what class characteristics are?
Class characteristics are features that are predetermined during the manufacturing process. So the manufacturer decides how the different components of the firearm are going to relate to each other. With other words, the relative shape of the firing pin, for example, the relative shape of the aperture of the firing pin, with other words, where the firing pin protrudes inside the firearm. The location of different components on the firearm, like the ejector and the extractor on the firearm. Also, the machining method used by the manufacturer. Some firearms are manufactured using milling cutters. Some are used through or are manufactured by using electrochemical methods. Some are hand finished with files, etc. So those are all determined by the manufacturer. When you're looking at a barrel, every barrel has a series of spiraling grooves cut into the barrel. Those grooves are essentially intended to cause the bullet to spin while it's traveling through the air. You want that gyrating motion basically to stabilize the bullet in flight. Those grooves are the width of those grooves, the direction of, or the orientation of the twist of the grooves. Those are all predetermined by the manufacturer. And they are standard not just to one firearm, but to every other firearm that's made to that same specification. Those are what we refer to as glass characteristics.
And can you explain to a jury what you mean when you talk about individual characteristics?
Individual characteristics are those characteristics that are unique to a specific firearm. That uniqueness is normally found in wear and tear of tooling that's used to manufacture the firearm. Also, any wear and tear that the firearm sort of incurs, or as the firearm evolves through lack of cleaning or improper cleaning methods, corrosion, erosion. As the firearm's fired, the heat and gases generated by the cartridges inside the firearm also tend to cause a certain degree of corrosion, which add to the uniqueness of the firearm. So yes, those are features that are unique to that specific firearm and normally develop as the firearm is used.
So you talked about your process and getting a known standard. Can you explain to the jury what that looks like at the lab?
So in the laboratory, we have a stockpile of ammunition, different types of ammunition, different calibers, different configurations. When a firearm is submitted for comparison, we would literally take and standard in accordance with our procedure, we would start with 2 testified samples. We would take 2 cartridges from our collection of, or our stock of ammunition in the laboratory, mark those with the last 3 digits of the serial number of the firearm, and then proceed to discharge the firearm and basically test fire it into a bullet recovery trap, which is essentially just a large tank of water.
And then once you get the known standard, can you explain to the jury how you compare that? What tools you use to compare it?
So we use a comparison microscope to do a direct physical comparison between the fired item, or the test-fired item rather, and the unknown or the questioned item. A comparison microscope is essentially 2 stereo microscopes, which are connected through an optical bridge. This allows you to view both stages of the microscope at the same time. And you can basically, when you're looking through this microscope and you have the 2 items on the 2 stages, you're able to see the 2 items right next to each other. You're able to superimpose those items and view essentially all the relevant markings on the firearm, manipulate the different items in order to line up markings, and to inspect if there's a visual correlation between different markings. And this is essentially how we do the comparison.
So in this case, were you asked to work on a case from the Vermont State Police involving the death of Emily Ferlazzo?
Yes, I did.
And what items did you receive from the Vermont State Police?
I received a 9mm caliber Glock Model 19 pistol with an aftermarket Silent Serco barrel with conventional rifling. I also received a Silent Serco silencer, which was compatible with the firearm. I received a bullet jacket, a fired bullet jacket. I received a bullet core, a fired bullet, and a magazine and several cartridges.
Your Honor, I now would ask the court to read stipulation number 9, which is State's Exhibit 124.
Any objections?
No objection, Judge.
This one's a long one. Stipulation number 9, members of the jury, the state and defendant, Joseph Ferlazzo, have agreed that you may find certain facts. This is called a stipulation. A partial projectile was collected from bag number 4 on October 20th, 2021 by Vermont State Police during Emily Faso's autopsy at the Office of the Chief Medical Examiner. This partial projectile was sent to the Vermont Forensic Lab. This partial projectile was analyzed by Harry Jeppe at the Vermont Forensic Lab and was in the same condition at the time of the analysis as it was when it was collected from bag number 4 on October 20th, 2021. This item was logged by the Vermont State Police as evidence item number 30/OCME number 4A. This item was logged by the Vermont Forensic Lab as item number A2. Chain of custody of the partial projectile is not being challenged. A Glock 19 firearm was collected on October 19th, 2021 by the Vermont State Police during a search of the camper pursuant to a valid search warrant. The firearm was sent to the Vermont Forensic Lab. This firearm was analyzed by Harry Jeppe at the Vermont Forensic Lab and was in the same condition at the time of the analysis as it was when collected from the camper during the search on October 19, 2021. This item was logged by the Vermont State Police as evidence item number 48/CSST ban number 11. This item was logged by the Vermont Forensic Lab as item number A3. Chain of custody of the Glock 19 firearm is not being challenged. A magazine and 10 rounds of ammunition were collected on October 19th, 2021 by Vermont State Police during a search of the camper pursuant to a valid search warrant. The magazine and ammunition were sent to the Vermont Forensic Lab. The magazine and ammunition were analyzed by Harry Jeppe at the Vermont Forensic Lab and was in the same condition at the time of the analysis as it was when collected from the camper during the search on October 19th, 2021. This item was logged by the Vermont State Police as evidence item number 53/CSST van number 11A. This item was logged by the Vermont Forensic Lab as item number A5. Chain of custody of the magazine and ammunition is not being challenged. A projectile was collected from inside a large pillow, parentheses in the pillowcase, end of parentheses, from bag number 2 on October 20th, 2021 by the Vermont State Police during Emily Faso's autopsy at the Office of the Chief Medical Examiner. This projectile was sent to the Vermont Forensic Lab. This projectile was analyzed by Harry Jeppe at the Vermont Forensic Lab and was in the same condition at the time of the analysis as it was when it was collected from bag number 2 on October 20th, 2021. This item was logged by the Vermont State Police as evidence item number 61/OCME number 2A. This item was logged by the Vermont Forensic Lab as item number A7. Chain of custody of the projectile is not being challenged. projectile was collected from inside a large pillow, parentheses, in the pillow, end of parentheses, from bag number 2 on October 20th, 2021 by Vermont State Police during Emily Faso's autopsy at the office of the Chief Medical Examiner. This projectile was sent to the Vermont Forensic Lab. This projectile was analyzed by Harry Jeppe at the Vermont Forensic Lab and was in the same condition at the time of the analysis as it was when it was collected from bag number 2 on October 20th, 2021. This item was logged by the Vermont State Police as evidence item number 62/OCME number 2B. This item was logged by the Vermont Forensic Lab as item number 88. Chain of custody of the projectiles not being challenged. A cartridge casing was collected from bag number 2 on October 20th, 2021 by Vermont State Police during Emily Faso's autopsy at the office of the Chief Medical Examiner. This cartridge casing was sent to the Vermont Forensic Lab. This cartridge casing was analyzed by Harry Jeppe at the Vermont Forensic Lab and was in the same condition at the time of the analysis as it was when it was collected from bag number 2 on October 20th, 2021. This item was logged by the Vermont State Police as evidence item number 63/OCME number 2C. This item was logged by the Vermont Forensic Lab as item number A9. Chain of custody of the cartridge casing is not being challenged. A silencer was collected on October 19th, 2021 by Vermont State Police during a search of the camper pursuant to a valid search warrant. The silencer was sent to the Vermont Forensic Lab. The silencer was analyzed by Harry Jeppe at the Vermont Forensic Lab and was in the same condition at the time of the analysis as it was when collected from the camper during the search on October 19th, 2021. This item was logged by the Vermont State Police as evidence item number 85/CSST, ban number 22. This item was logged by the Vermont Forensic Lab as item number 811. Chain of custody of the silencer is not being challenged. As with any evidence in this trial, you must decide what rate you will give this stipulation that State's Exhibit 124 is admitted in evidence.
Thank you. Marked and admitted as States 79. Do you know what State 79 is?
That is correct. This is a gun box. I noticed my initials on the seals on this box. So this is the gun box that I received evidence in on this case.
And can you explain to the jury what you did as part of your examination of the firearm?
So, first of all, when we receive the evidence, we would typically open the box. The box would be sealed by our client agency, in this case, State Police. We would open the seals, open the box, and the evidence would then be packaged normally as it is here with zip tied down to the inside of the box in order to prevent it from moving around.
And were you able to tell from this firearm what the make is?
Yes. After unpacking the firearm, I would generally photograph the firearm as a first step. I would then proceed with checking the serial number of the firearm against the submission form to ensure that the firearm that I received is indeed consistent with what was submitted by the client agency, I would then proceed to record all the unique details pertaining to the firearm. That is the make, the model, the serial number, the type of magazine, the safety systems on the firearm. I would check the safety systems in order to ensure that if they in a functional condition, I would then proceed with checking the barrel to see that there are no obstructions in the barrel prior to test firing. At that time, I would also determine the direction of twist of the rifling by looking through the barrel of the firearm. Would also count the amount of lands and grooves inside the interior profile of the barrel and record those. This firearm I identified as a Glock Model 19 semi-automatic pistol.
And were the safety features working correctly?
Yes.
Is that firearm in the same condition as it would be when it was purchased?
This firearm is fitted with an aftermarket, with other words, not a standard barrel. An aftermarket barrel that I determined to be from a manufacturer called Silent Serco.
Showing you now what has been marked and admitted as 79A. Do you recognize that?
Yes, I do.
And what is 79A for the jury?
This is a box magazine that is compatible with the firearm I just handled, and these are unfired cartridges that were submitted with the firearm.
And what type of rounds are these?
These are SIG head-stamped 9mm Luger caliber cartridges.
So I'm now showing you what's been marked as and admitted as 52A. What is that?
This is a Silent Serco company manufactured pistol silencer.
Did you examine or did you investigate whether that silencer can be used on State 79?
Yes, I did.
And can it be used on State
Yes, it
79?
can.
How do you put the silencer on the Glock?
The aftermarket barrel is the muzzle of the barrel, with other words, the tip of the barrel is threaded. The silencer is threaded as well, so it's basically like screwing a ball in. You screw it onto the end of the barrel.
Does it require any special tools?
No, it doesn't.
Did you put the silencer on the Glock?
Yes, I did.
About how long does it take?
I didn't specifically time it, but less than a minute.
Would this silencer be capable of fitting on another firearm?
It would be able to fit on another similarly threaded barrel, yes.
So is it fair to say that it would have to fit onto a firearm that had this aftermarket barrel?
It will only fit on a firearm that is consistent with the caliber designation of this silencer, and that basically this silencer can screw onto. It does not necessarily have to be the same manufacturer. There are actually other manufacturers that who manufacture aftermarket barrels that are threaded with the same thread pattern as found on this Silent Serco silencer, and therefore, strictly speaking, this silencer would also fit on those barrels. But yes, certainly it would fit on the Silent Serco aftermarket barrel that we have on the submitted Glock Model 19 pistol.
When you were conducting your test fires, did you test the firearm using the silencer and also not using the silencer?
Yes, that's correct.
Did the firearm work properly when using the silencer?
Yes, the firearm performed flawlessly with both the silencer and the without the silencer.
Does a fired cartridge or a fired bullet, does that have different markings on it if a silencer is used?
Not necessarily, but it could. Because of the fact that the silencer is an attachment to the barrel, there are some critical issues that could determine whether the bullet is in fact going to be marked by the silencer or not. The primary there would be the alignment between the silencer and the barrel. If the alignment is proper between the silencer and the barrel, then generally speaking, the bullet would not touch any part of the silencer as it moves through the silencer. And therefore, the silencer would have no effect on it. However, we cannot always sort of ascertain whether it aligns perfectly by simply looking at it. And generally, therefore, in cases like this, we would also fire it with the silencer in case the bullet at some point contacts the silencer as the bullet moves through the barrel or through the silencer, and essentially causes markings that are not that are not directly relatable to the barrel.
So after you test fired the Glock and had your known standards, did you compare known standards with additional evidence that you had received in this case?
Yes, I did.
I'm now showing you. What has been previously marked and admitted as 83A. And if you can tell the jury what that is.
This is a 9mm caliber fired bullet core, which I received as item and marked as item A7-1.
And just for clarification, is this core normally encapsulated in a copper jacket?
That is correct. This is not a complete bullet. This is one part of a bullet.
And did you examine 83A to one of the known standards using the comparison microscope?
I did not compare this item. A bullet core does not have sufficient markings for, or any markings for identification. Therefore, I did not do a comparison.
Okay. Is it, I think we already touched on this, but just to be clear, is it common for a bullet core to have markings on it?
It is uncommon, no.
Okay.
Oh, yes, rather.
So I'm now showing you what's been admitted as 91A. And what is that?
This is a fired bullet jacket.
And is this what we're talking when we talk about the copper jacketing?
This is the copper jacket, so the core would literally sort of be encapsulated in this copper jacket.
And did you do a comparison with this item with the known standards?
Yes, I did.
And what were you able to obtain results?
This bullet jacket did not have sufficient marking or unique markings for identification, so I was not able to identify it to the submitted firearm. However, the bullet is consistent in caliber, consistent in land and groove widths, consistent in twist direction with the firearm, with other words, class characteristics, as I explained earlier, and therefore I could not exclude it as having been fired from the firearm either. So therefore, my finding was an inconclusive finding. I cannot say if this bullet was fired from the firearm, and I cannot say that the bullet was not fired from the firearm.
Okay. I'm now showing you 84A. If you could explain to the jury what that is.
This is a fired bullet consisting of both a bullet core and a bullet jacket.
And were you able to examine this item and try to make an identification?
Yes, I examined this item and determined also that it was consistent in class characteristics with the firearm, but there were insufficient individual markings for identification. Therefore, as with the other item, I was also not able to say if the bullet was fired from the firearm or if it was not fired from the firearm. I was also not able to determine if this bullet was fired in the same firearm as the submitted bullet jacket or not.
And that inconclusive result is based on a lack of individual markings?
It is based on a lack of individual characteristics, which I explained earlier, yes.
Okay. And I'm now showing you 85A. What's 85A?
85A was an item which I marked as A9-1. It is a 9 millimeter Luger caliber fired cartridge case with an SIG head stamp.
And were you able to do a comparison with this item?
Yes, I compared this firearm to the known standard from the firearm that was submitted and determined that this cartridge case was fired from the submitted firearm.
And is that based on individual characteristics or class characteristics or both?
It is based on both. We start by looking for class characteristics. If the class characteristics are consistent, we start looking for individual characteristics. So that's the sequence. Generally, if it's inconclusive, the class characteristics are consistent, but there's not sufficient consistency in individual characteristics to make a determination. In this case, both the class characteristics and the individual characteristics were in sufficient agreement to determine that this cartridge case was, in fact, fired from the firearm.
So I am going to go back to 84A. When you were examining 84A, did you notice anything about this item?
I believe that this is the item that I removed a piece of cloth from. This item, the bullet had a piece of fabric basically lodged in the nose cavity of the bullet, which I subsequently removed.
Okay, so I'm now showing you what's been marked as states 84B. Do you recognize that?
Yes, this is consistent with the piece of cloth that I removed from, or the piece of fabric that I removed from the nose cavity of the bullet.
And when you removed that, did that piece of fabric get returned to the Vermont State Police?
Yes, I returned it to them.
Your Honor, the state would move to admit states 84B.
No objection.
before B is admitted.
I do not have any other questions.
Ms. Jen?
No questions. Thank you.
Thank you.